Back in 1985, something terrifying was happening in California. A killer was walking free. And the scariest part? Nobody knew his face. Families started locking their doors twice. Parents pulled their kids inside before sunset. Neighbors who never talked suddenly formed watch groups because this man could enter any home, any night. Between 1984 and 1985, he attacked again and again. Old, young, rich, poor, no one was safe. Police had no pattern, no motive, no answers. The city was frozen in fear. Every night, people asked the same question: are we next? But here's the thing. This story doesn't end the way you expect. How he was finally caught will surprise you, and who stopped him? That's even more shocking. So today, we're going deep inside the story of Richard Ramirez. How did one man terrorize an entire region, and what finally brought him down? Stay till the end, because this case will haunt you. So the story begins in 1960, in a small house in El Paso, Texas. A baby is born, Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez, the youngest of 5 children. But this home was filled with poverty and fear. His father was harsh and often violent. His mother was too overwhelmed to protect anyone. By early childhood, Ricardo had suffered serious head injuries. Doctors later said these injuries may have damaged his brain. Now think about this for a moment. Imagine growing up where anger is the only language spoken, where pain is not rare, it's normal. In that world, a child learns one lesson: the strongest person wins. But here's where it gets even darker. Ricardo had an older cousin named Mike. Mike was a war veteran who came back completely broken. He showed young Ricardo things no child should ever see: violence, drugs, crime, all before Ricardo was even a teenager. And one day, Ricardo witnessed something terrible involving Mike, something that erased a boundary in his mind forever. After that, Ricardo started to change. By his teenage years, he was already drifting. Drugs, theft, break-ins, and no one stopped him. No help, no guidance, no intervention. Then, in the early 1980s, he moved to California, and that's when the real nightmare began. So in June 1984, an elderly woman named Jenny Vincow was found dead in her Los Angeles apartment. Police thought it was just one isolated case, but it wasn't. Over the next 14 months, more attacks followed across Southern California, each one more random than the last. No pattern, no motive, no connection. The attacker used unlocked doors and open windows. He struck late at night when families were most vulnerable. By early 1985, the media gave him a name: the Night Stalker. Fear spread across the region. Home security sales exploded. Neighbors started patrolling their own streets. But here's what confused investigators the most. In some homes, children were left unharmed. Only adults were targeted. It wasn't mercy. Experts believed it was a twisted logic inside his mind. The pressure on police was growing every day. And then, one small detail changed everything. On August 24th, 1985, something different happened. A violent attack took place in Mission Viejo, California. The attacker escaped, but this time, he left something behind. A car linked to the crime was found abandoned nearby. And inside that car, a single fingerprint. Investigators submitted it for analysis. The result came back: a confirmed match. For the first time, the Night Stalker had a name: Richard Ramirez, a 25-year-old with a criminal record. Here's the twist. Ramirez had no idea he'd been identified. While police raced to find him, he was still walking free. His face was released to the public immediately. Newspapers, TV broadcasts, store windows, his photo was everywhere. But one big problem remained. He was still out there, and what happened next, no one saw it coming. On August 31st, 1985, Richard Ramirez walked into a small store in East Los Angeles. He glanced at the newspapers on display, and then he saw it, his own face on every front page. In that moment, he knew the truth. His identity was no longer a secret. He ran. For over a year, this man had moved through the city like a ghost. But now, everyone knew who he was, and the fear he created was turning into something stronger. determination. As Ramirez ran through the neighborhood, people started to notice. One resident raised the alarm. Others joined immediately. Within minutes, a growing crowd surrounded him. They didn't wait for police. They restrained him themselves. Here's what makes this moment remarkable. Despite all their anger, the crowd chose restraint. They held him until authorities arrived. No revenge, just justice. When police finally took him into custody, the chase was over. But the reckoning? That was just beginning. In 1988, Richard Ramirez's trial finally began. It lasted more than a year, and it became one of the most watched court cases in American history. Cameras followed every moment. Reporters filled the courtroom. And Ramirez? He seemed to enjoy it. Now imagine being a survivor sitting in that room, hearing painful details about what happened to your family, and watching the man responsible show zero remorse. No guilt, no shame, just indifference. That's what families endured day after day. Throughout the trial, Ramirez made shocking statements. He used symbols tied to extremist beliefs. His behavior was so disturbing that some families had to leave. But here's the twisted part. Despite everything, Ramirez attracted admirers. People wrote him letters of support. One woman even married him in prison. The jury, however, saw the truth. In 1989, they delivered the verdict, guilty on multiple counts. The sentence? Death. But that punishment would take decades to carry out. After the trial, Richard Ramirez was sent to San Quentin State Prison. He sat on death row for 23 years. During that time, he filed endless appeals. He gave interviews to journalists and documentarians, and he became a strange kind of celebrity. Now imagine being a survivor of his attacks. You know he's supposed to die for what he did, but year after year, he's still alive, still breathing, still talking to cameras. The waiting itself becomes a form of torture. His appeals cost taxpayers millions of dollars. In 2009, DNA evidence linked him to a 1984 murder he was never charged with. His response? He just shrugged. No remorse, no regret, nothing. But here's the irony that haunts this case. Ramirez never faced execution. On June 7, 2013, he died from cancer. Natural causes, not the death penalty. For some families, his death brought relief. For others, it felt incomplete. Justice delayed felt like justice denied. His death was barely covered by major media. The world had moved on. But the survivors? They never forgot. And his legacy? That's still being felt today. The Nightstalker case didn't just end with an arrest. It changed America forever. Think about a time when people left their doors unlocked at night, when windows stayed open during summer. After Ramirez, that innocence was gone. Fear became the new normal. Sales of deadbolts and security systems skyrocketed. Firearms flew off the shelves. Computerized fingerprint databases became standard practice. Multi-agency task forces were formed to handle future cases. One killer forced an entire country to rethink safety. Think about how one event changes everything. After 9/11, airport security changed forever. After Ramirez, home security did the same. But here's the dark side of his legacy. His fame inspired copycats. Some criminals saw his notoriety as a blueprint. Yet the biggest impact came from the survivors. They carried the scars. They told their stories. They made sure the world never forgot. Ramirez wanted to break society, but society rebuilt, stronger than before. His case remains one of the most studied in criminology. But what was really going on inside his mind? For decades, criminologists and psychologists have studied Richard Ramirez. What they found is deeply disturbing. Now imagine trying to understand a mind so broken, a mind that finds joy in the suffering of others. That's the challenge experts faced. Ramirez showed traits of psychopathy and narcissism. Some experts believed he had signs of schizophrenia. His childhood trauma, his head injuries, his exposure to violence, all of it combined. It created a perfect storm. He wasn't born evil, he was shaped by it. Now think about mental health for a moment. Early intervention could have changed everything. Ramirez is proof of what happens when warning signs are ignored. But here's the chilling truth. Ramirez knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't insane, he was fully aware, and that makes it even more terrifying. Understanding his past doesn't excuse his actions. We can study his psychology, but we must condemn what he chose to do. He once said, "I don't believe in the moralistic dogma of this so-called civilized society." He rejected all morality, but what about the people he hurt? Their stories deserve to be heard. Not everyone Ramirez attacked died. Some survived, and their stories are incredibly powerful. Now imagine surviving an encounter with pure evil. You're alive, but you're forever changed. Survivors like Inez Erickson stood up in court. They described the terror they experienced, the trauma that followed, the long, painful road to recovery. Many suffered from PTSD, anxiety, and nightmares for decades. But here's what makes their stories remarkable. They didn't just survive, they rebuilt their lives. Many became advocates for victims' rights. Others raised awareness about mental health and crime prevention. They turned their pain into purpose. Their stories remind us of one simple truth. Evil exists in this world, but so does courage. The conflict they faced was brutal, trauma versus healing, and they chose healing. That choice is nothing short of heroic. One survivor later said, "He took a lot from me, but he didn't take my life, and he didn't take my hope." These survivors rebuilt, but the bigger question still remains. What did we actually learn? The Night Stalker case is more than just a crime story. It's a lesson about vigilance, justice, and humanity. Now imagine a world where early intervention actually happens, where mental health resources are available to everyone, where communities come together before tragedy strikes. That's the goal we should be working toward. This case taught us some hard truths. Childhood trauma matters, mental health matters, community vigilance matters, and justice, even when it's slow, is always worth fighting for. Think about learning from the past. The Night Stalker case is a roadmap for prevention. But here's the honest truth. We can't stop all evil. Some darkness will always find a way, but we can respond with courage, compassion, and justice. Richard Ramirez is gone, but the lessons from his case remain alive. The real conflict is simple: fear versus action. We can live in fear, or we can act to protect each other. This case is still required reading in criminology courses around the world. And the ultimate truth? Evil exists. We must never forget that. Richard Ramirez was evil. There's no other word for it. He brought terror to thousands of homes. He stole lives, safety, and peace from an entire region. But his story also proves something powerful. Communities can fight back, justice can prevail, and survivors can heal. Here's the twist nobody expected. The Night Stalker wanted to break society. He wanted to spread chaos and fear forever. But instead, he strengthened it. Neighbors started protecting each other. Strangers became allies. And when the moment came, ordinary people took him down. The lesson from this case is simple. Lock your doors, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the power of a united community. Ramirez is dead now. His victims are remembered. And justice, though imperfect and slow, won. Remember the question from the beginning? How does one man paralyze an entire region? The answer is fear. But here's the truth. Fear can be conquered. Now ask yourself this. Are you vigilant? Are you prepared? And if you saw evil standing in front of you, would you act? The Night Stalker's reign ended because people chose courage over fear. That's the ultimate truth. Evil is real, but so is justice. The Night Stalker's reign of terror is finally over. Richard Ramirez is gone, but the lessons from his case will never fade. Courage can defeat darkness, community can overpower evil, and justice, no matter how long it takes, can win. That's the value of this story. Not just the horror, but the hope. Ordinary people stood up when it mattered most. Survivors rebuilt their lives with strength, and an entire nation learned to protect itself better. If this story moved you, share it with others. Let them learn from the past. Now it's your turn. What's your biggest takeaway from the Night Stalker case? Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe justice matters, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this isn't just a true crime story, it's a reminder. We must never stop fighting for what's right. The night always ends, and the light always returns.